Welcome back to another session of From the Field, brought to you from all the way Auckland, New Zealand, here with AWS. My name's Trevor Kennedy. We're going to start with a karakia. So, Dipithika, will you do the honour for us, please?
Thanks, Trevor. So let's start with the karakia. Tutawamai I ronga, tutawamai I raro, tutawamai I roto, tutawamai I waho. Kiato ai, timauri tu, timauri ora, kite katoa, haumie, huie, taikie. Welcome everyone to our From the Field special show with our special guest with Marcia Villalba. So,
Hello.
Marcia. So, my name is Deepika Kumar, and I'm an ISV solution architect here at AWS New Zealand. And today we have Marcia on our show. Marcia is a principal developer advocate with AWS. We are dealing with two different time zones. Marcia is based in Finland, and we are in New Zealand. So, thank you, Marcia. We are really grateful for you to be here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me and changing your normal time zone for something that is reasonable for me, so I don't need to be up in the middle of the night.
Thanks, Marcia. Actually, I was talking to a few of our developers and my DevOps friends, and they were super excited when I mentioned that Marcia is coming on the show. So, welcome here. And I'll just share some cool facts about Marcia. So, I think some of the viewer will know Marcia runs her own channel, Fuba Serverless, where she shares her passion via coding and teaching with her subscribers. And even my 9-year-old, she is subscribed to Marcia's channel, and she has built her own first website watching Marcia's serverless videos. How cool is it?
Yeah.
So
She may
thanks for
be
that.
the youngest subscriber.
Yeah. Hopefully you won't see her into the backgrounds today. So, few other cool facts around Marcia that prior to joining AWS, Marcia was a serverless hero and she's a serverless champion too. So, with that, I'll hand over to Marcia. If you can describe that, what is the role of the principal developer advocate? What is your day look like as a developer advocate?
If only I will know. I don't know. Well, part of our shop, well, it has many different parts, so it's kind of hard to describe what is a normal day, but we do things like this one, talking to community and sharing the AWS love and knowledge and trying to simplify things for you, putting things together so it's easier for everybody to understand how they start building with AWS. Then another very important part is we are the ears for the community. So every time you complain on the internet, we are taking notes and passing all that feedback to our product teams. If you don't know, AWS features, 90% of them come from your feedback, from what you need, from what you want to build. So when you complain, AWS has a lot of things, it's because of you. You are asking for all those things and we are building. And part of the developer advocates is to hear that, to understand what are your pain points, how you are struggling, and pass that feedback back to the service team. So it's a kind of two-side. We do a lot of outbound. We try to help you out. And then we take all your complaints and what you need, what you are like, what will help you so much, and put it back to the service team. So we can say that those are the two main things. And what a day looks, I don't know. It's every day is very different. Sometimes, like today, I start early with this live stream, and I have another live stream for Latam in the night. So it's a very live day. But other days I'm traveling, other days I'm just no meetings, nothing, and just building content from scratch. So it really depends on what is coming up and how every day is very different.
So you basically just get to present all day and sit on Twitch. It sounds like a perfect job. How do I get that job? I want to change from solution architecture.
Yeah, basically that's what we do. We wave our hands.
That's great to know. I think whoever our live audiences are, that's a great tip which Marcia has provided here. So if you want to look at some new features or looking some improvement on our services, provide us that feedback, reach out to us, and we will be able to take your feedback to the product team via Marcia as well.
Yeah. So I'm
Yes.
always happy to get all the feedback. So you can always reach me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I have always some running poll asking question like, hey, how you feel about this? How you feel about that? But if I don't ask, just reach out to me and tell me, I will love that X, and I will be okay. Thank you. I will pass it to the service team.
I'm curious, do you have a different interaction with the service team like that than like solution architects like myself and Deepika, or is there more of a direct connection there, or is it the same sort of mechanisms?
Well, I'm a developer advocate for the serverless team. So I have a direct connection with the product managers from API Gateway, Lambda, Step Functions, and Event Bridge. So I talk with them regularly. I talk with their GMs or with the head of the businesses regularly, and we get to basically design what will be the next features and decide together what are the next features based on what the community and what the users wants.
Okay, that's why every time I try and talk to them, they say talk to the hand, but you're clearly much more important than me, Marcia.
Or more annoying, I don't know.
So, Marcia, before we go really technical deep dive, I know you mentioned few services name. Before we deep dive, I would really like to understand that how did you transition from a developer to principal developer advocacy?
I don't know. It's been in a while, but I have to say that when I started, I think with serverless in 2016 or something like that. Before that, I was 100% developer. I'm still 100% developer. I didn't want to know anything about instances or things like that. It looked very, I don't know. That's not my cup of tea. I just leave it to the ops team. And then we had some problem in our work. I was not working in AWS by then. I was working in a gaming industry, and I always tinker with technology. So that's something that is part of my personality. I always tinker with different technologies. But that time I was tinkering with serverless. Serverless was in its early times. Basically, by that time there was no even API gateway. It was just Lambda. API gateway was starting to connect to Lambda in that early times. And we had a problem at work where I thought serverless could be the right tool, or maybe I just thought it because I was tinkering with that and I wasn't showing it. And suddenly I became the architect of that product and that feature. And that led me to learn cloud and learn infrastructure as code. I've been a developer, so for me, the only way to do infrastructure is with code. I don't feel the console. I don't remember how to click on things. So I started early on with that, and that led me to create a lot of content for serverless because by that time there was nothing. When I wanted to train my team on how to do serverless, there was very little documents out there, very little use cases. So I started my YouTube channel for my team. And then AWS noticed it, and well, I started becoming a spokesperson for AWS in like a hero, and then they got me in the team, and now I'm here. So it was a journey.
Yeah. That's a great story, isn't it? How we are seeing that how cloud is enabling businesses and even individuals as well,
Yeah.
bringing the visibility in their skill sets. And similar to that, we also run some programs in New Zealand, especially for women like Hapuri Wahini. That's where the women are learning the cloud essential skills. So if any of our audience, they are interested into such programs, learning cloud, that's a good way to start your cloud journey as well. So, Marcia, you mentioned that in 2016, when you started your cloud journey, API Gateway just started, not much documentation were there. And I think I have started at the similar time, Lambdas and APIs Gateway. So, have seen the evolution of how these services are evolving. And nowadays, I think they are the number of customers whom I am working with, these services are integral part of their businesses, and we are releasing every month or every day lots of new features in there. So I'd like to understand from you that what are your favorite recent announcements which you have seen that those were the game changers and helping customers there.
Well, for me, the game changer announcements are the ones related to event driven architectures. I don't know if you saw last year Werner Vogel, our CTO keynote. He spent basically like, I don't know, half of the keynote talking about how event driven architectures, how important they are, how they enable us. So for me, I think that's the services that I want to see more, because integration patterns, enterprise integration, like thinking about how we can connect legacy systems with more modern systems. Cannot build everything from scratch. It's a game changer. So during reInvent, we launched three major things that I think they have been helping a lot of customers, and they have been, I think, some of them are not really well known because event driven is something new for many organizations, but when they get to know it, they're like, oh, ooh, interesting, I didn't know that AWS could do that. So the first one is event bridge scheduler, then event bridge pipes, and finally a step functions distributed map. So we can talk more in detail on them if you want to, but for me those are the three recent launches that are very, very important.
I think the one service which really picked my mind, because some of the customers I'm working with is around enterprise integration patterns, and that's where these customers, some of my customers, are really complaining that how we can make that integration seamless for them. If you look at the industry, on an average, a business uses 20 to 25 SaaS applications or business applications,
Yeah.
and they are looking at integrating these systems, which is such a challenge. Either their teams are spending so much time writing those integration code. So if you can explain that how even bridge pipes like integrations, they can solve their problems, simplify their integration landscape, that will be great, Marcia.
Yes, so let's do that. I prepare a little slides so it's easier to explain patterns and things like that in a more visual way. So we can get the slides in the screen maybe, and we can look a little bit of what is pipes. So EventBridge is a service that has been since I think 2019. So it's not that old service, but it was providing event buses. So the idea of event bus is a very old kind of enterprise concept that has been around, but basically we stopped using it because the amount of data that was trafficking was kind of hard, because, well, event bus is basically a bus where all the events go through, and it's been kind of challenging before the cloud to use that because it was kind of a bottleneck. If you could not scale your bus, then it was very hard to send more events. Now with the cloud and event bus, that's something that the cloud manage for you. It can scale up as much as you need. So we enable a lot of organizations to return to that pattern and allows them to connect mostly their microservices together. But customers were asking, like, well, we have different types of event sources. It's not only that we are using event bus as to travel our data. Some of our customers were using Kinesis. Some of them were using RabbitMQ. Others were using queues or Kafka or things like that. And Dynamo, it's also in the place. And we want to connect that between different targets. So sometimes we want to connect one Kinesis that we have here with another Kinesis, or sometimes we want to connect Kinesis with EventBridge bus, or we want to connect our queues with the bus. So we thought, like, well, how we can help the customers to achieve that. And that's where Pipes comes into place. We have a service that allows you to connect different event sources with different event targets. So now you can connect your Kinesis with event bus, you can connect your DynamoDB with EventBridge, and this allows to have different kind of services talking to each other, and EventBridge Pipes will handle that transformation. So EventBridge Pipes is not only a way to connect these two things seamlessly, but it also provides a filtering feature that allows you to filter messages. So sometimes you want some messages to drop or not to appear in the target, and you can do that very simply with Pipes. And then sometimes you want to enrich the messages, either adding more information or making your events kind of modern. For example, you have a legacy service that is sending events maybe with some with some data that is not structured as you want to receive it in your target, and you can use this enrich capability to change the events. I will show you more of these things in patterns in a second, so you can understand how you can use the filter and enrich. But this is basically, in a nutshell, pipes. If you want to go to the patterns, we can talk about that, unless you have some questions around pipes.
I have one. So the sources and targets are AWS only? Like
Yes,
obviously MSK is an implementation of
manage Kafka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we use Kafka as an event source or a target?
Manage Kafka.
Only AWS has managed Kafka. Okay.
Yes. So the event sources are kind of fixed because, well, but that opens a lot of opportunities already for many customers to build things.
Marcia, are there any
Yes.
plans to add more event sources in future? Yes, I understand that we keep adding new features. So
I don't know. If you want some new source, just keep on sending them, so PMs know that we need more, and maybe they add more.
I could imagine Kafka would be a logical target, right? I mean, all of my customers, enterprise customers, have Kafka, whether it be Confluence Kafka or another version of Kafka, Azure Kafka, for example. So trying to integrate with those other event sources, to me, seems like a logical progression.
Yeah.
Marcia,
Yeah.
I think you covered that filter, the filtering one. I think we are going into the pattern.
Yes, I will explain how more enrichment and the filter works in the patterns. It will be clear to see it with some examples.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes. So the first one is a simple one. Is the first pattern is the content filter and message filter. So the idea here is to either drop messages that you don't want from the target, from the source to the target, or then filter out attributes of the message that you don't want the target to see. So in this case, we have two different events that are coming from our source. Imagine that you have, I don't know, a Kinesis stream that is getting all the events that a game is producing or something like that. And that is producing events that are relevant to our downstream services, like, I don't know, when the customer make an order, and then some events that are more for analytic purposes and things like that. So we can drop that, we can filter those messages out directly on pipes. And then, for example, for the order ones, we want to remove the private information for the customer. So in this case, you can see that the second event has this username and this birthday that is very personal information, and we don't want to pass that to our downstream services because we don't need it, and we want to keep it as clean as possible. So we can filter out those things, and we can even then I will show you how you can even change those things later. But for example, here we have the example of Kinesis, and we connect pipes, and using the filter for filtering out messages and the input transformation, that is basically removing attributes, we can send it to another Kinesis, just the events we want, just with the attributes we want. And I will show you a demo on how we can do this filtering and how we can do this input transformation in code in a second. But let's go through the patterns so you can understand what are the use cases. So for example, here is the example I wanted to show you, that you can either, for example, the birthday, now we are grouping it by age because we might need that for our analytics or something like that. So we can have an enrichment in the middle that says, okay, instead of passing the birthday, we just pass the age group category. So then we can use that for our analytic purposes. And if we want to do that, we just simply call a Lambda function in the middle that will grab each of the events and do that enrichment functionality, basically grouping the age, depending on the birthday, it will put it in a group of age category. So events come in, all kind of events. Some events get filtered, like, for example, the ones that are not an order. And then because they go through this Lambda function, they get transform into something that the downstream services can process. So this is a very powerful pattern because we can then manipulate the events on the fly, and we don't need to change neither the downside streams or then the source stream. So everything stays the same. We just have this middle layer in the middle that is kind of manipulating the data for us. So it really helps the integration between different services.
Marcia, we had a very good question on the chat on that from Tiro that it's not directly related to Event Bridge, but what are the best practices for delivering privacy related to data, for example, customer data in events and state function?
Well, as with anything, when you're working with events, you need to have you need to be careful with the data that you put in the events. So when you are passing private information in the event, you need to really make sure that that data is needed downstream. You need to encrypt the event, because then if not, that event will be visible for whoever listens for that event. So make sure that you encrypt it, and only the right services have the key to open that event. But my recommendation is to try to be very, very careful on how you put your private information in the events, because, for example, in the European law, when you you might be, some customer may say, hey, I want all my data to be removed, and if you have log or store that data somewhere, it will be very painful to remove it. And when you're working with event-driven architectures, you might not know all your consumers of the events, so that opens a challenge for security and for privacy. So when you're creating those events, you have the control there to make sure that those events are as tightly, as secure as possible, because after that, it's harder to have the control.
Thanks, Marcia.
Yes, it's a good question, and it's very important to think about that. So another pattern here is the message translator pattern. So basically, sometimes we have services that are sending information in one format, and the downstream services need the information in a different format. For example, we send an address, but our downstream services need coordinates. And we can achieve that pretty simple with pipes. So here I'm using an API destination that will call some translator of addresses into coordinates, and then I'm creating the new event to send to the downstream. And that's pretty simple to do it with event bridge pipes. Another similar case is when we have events that are coming with different formats, like for example, here it's the customer name is separated into things, but our downstream services need it in like one row. And this happens quite often because our different services might have different schemas. Sometimes within our application, we can control the schemas, but when we are integrating bigger applications or bigger systems or legacy systems together, this is kind of hard to change. So having a kind of system in the middle that can do this transformation really makes the code and the application in the downstream simpler, because we can assume that the events are well formed and they are adhering to our schema. So in here, again, with just an input transformer that is coming directly from the pipe. So this is just basically a small JSON. We can transform that to, for example, names into a one row name, and it's pretty straightforward. But sometimes, and this I will show you in the demo, we have different systems sending different types of events that are kind of similar. And this happens quite a lot. For example, when I was working in the gaming industry, we have a lot of SDKs that were integrated into the games, and the SDKs were evolving. And they were evolving, but basically the customers needed to update the game in order to get the latest SDK. And some customers never updated the game. So they were sending events that were with the oldest SDK, and those events were totally outdated. So I would have loved this functionality by then, because it was such a lot of code that we needed to write in order to handle all the different variations of the SDK, outdated versions, in order for us to process those events. Here, it doesn't matter if all the different sources are sending different formats, because now with pipes, we can analyze the different systems, where the input is coming, what is the source, and then produce an event that is kind of adhering to our schema in our downstream events. So this one is a little bit more complicated, and I will show it in the demo. Basically, it's a step function that will say, okay, if it's coming from, I don't know, iOS or this version, this is the way that you transform this event. If it's coming from Android and this version, I'm going back to my game example, then do this. If it's coming, and then you can create different, for example, Lambda function or whatever modifications you can do in your state machine to produce this event that makes sense to your current schema. And then you don't need to add that logic into your applications, in your downstream services. And that simplifies a lot of things. So another way to do it is you can create a pipe for each of the services, and that's totally valid. But then you need to handle all these different connections. But that's another way. And in this case, you might not need a state machine. You just use the input transformer. That is a feature that it's available in pipe, that you can transform the attributes, and you say, okay, these are the attributes, as we did with the translation pattern, that we can just, okay, we have these two lines to form the name, and now we have one line, and we use the input transformer feature.
This is quite a great use case here, and it depends that how organization wants to architect it. We are different pipes or using the step functions here. So it gives the flexibility and the power to the customers that how they want to architect their system there.
Yeah, exactly. And it depends on your use case. How complex is this? Sometimes this input transformer is not enough. So for example, in the demo, I'm going to show you, I will show you the use case where you have different systems, in this case, different devices sending events. And for one of the devices, it's sending, and this is a use case that happened to me. I will show it in the demo in a second, but it's not sending the username, it's sending the device ID, because it's an old, outdated version of the SDK. And then we might need to call a Lambda function or do some search in some table to get that device ID onto what is the username or user ID. So this input transformer can be something simple, or then it can be a Lambda function, or it can be something more calling some API or something like that. So it really depends on what you need. Sometimes it's a simple transformation, sometimes it's not.
We have a couple of questions here, Marcia. First one is, can you filter on PII information?
No, for that you will need to use a service. I think it's Comprehend that allows you to do filter on PII. So you will need to use Lambda and Comprehend to do that.
Okay, and then a follow-up question here. I'm using the app sync through HTTP endpoints as a data source. Is it possible to use this app sync API to another API/microservice?
I don't think API AppSync is not a data. It's not a source for this. Event Bridge is a data source for API nowadays. So I don't know how this will connect. I don't have a clue.
Yeah. And then a question from me. What if it's the same service to the same service? Can we use this for filtering? So for example, I'm thinking from an MSK topic, I've got maybe a whole bunch of raw data. I want to clean up that and put it into a separate topic, so basically going from MSK to MSK, but I want to be able to filter everything in between.
For example, I show you here from one Kinesis data stream to another Kinesis data stream.
Yep. So that'll work with them. Yep. Perfect.
And Marcia, another question from my side, like one of my customer, one of their biggest challenge was that their event size was quite big. So
that's the next pattern I was about to show you. When your event size is very big, how you can handle it. So you were reading my mind. So this is quite a normal use case. When you have a large message, you have a big event. So Event Bridge allows you to have 256 megabytes, and many of these event services have this kind of kbytes have this kind of limit payload, because you don't want to send a book, but sometimes customers need to send a book. So what happens if you have this large payload? Well, you can use pipes for that. And for that, we are going to use this claim check pattern that basically the producer will receive this very big message and will store that data somewhere, for example, in Dynamo or somewhere in S3, and then attach it to a Dynamo table with a key. So we will create a key like, I don't know, user ID or some special key or whatever. And then it will just send the smaller message with the key. And then in the consumer side, we can grab that data, for example, in this case, with an enricher and get that data back. So from the table. So in this case, the consumer will just receive the user ID. For example, that's our key. And then based on that enrichment function that we will have in the middle, we'll grab whatever it's stored. So here, for example, we can call an external API to download a blurb of information, or we can use call with a Lambda S3 or whatever, wherever we store that big chunk of data. So we can do that and use Dynamo, for example, to store this kind of connection between the user ID and the S3 URL, for example, or this kind of connection. And then we can send that to the target. So this is a way to do this claim check pattern.
That's great. Thanks, Marcia.
Yeah, that's the patterns I want to just show you today. There's many, but I think these are the most important.
Yeah, that's great to look at the pattern. I'm looking forward to see the demo on this.
Yeah. Let me know if you want to jump to the demo. We can jump, or we can keep on chatting and then do the demo. You are leading here.
Trevor, can we have a 5-minute quick demo?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, let's go. Let me go here. So I will demo. Here's my pipe. So the idea here is that we have a Kinesis stream. In this case, for example, my imagination when I was building this was my experience in the gaming industry. As I said, I would have loved this feature when I was working in this industry. When you work in mobile games or in gaming in general, you take a lot of analytics. So you take basically everything that the customer is doing. You are click, 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 click. There, it's being sent either with Kafka or Kinesis. That data is being consumed. And as I was saying before, we used to have different SDKs, and the SDKs were all providing different data, because even though we have the latest version, sometimes customers never update it. And this is the feature I would have loved by then. The idea here is that we have this Kinesis stream that will receive the events from there. We have this pipe that will receive events from Kinesis stream and will filter the events that we care. So imagine that we only care about the, as we were saying before, the order or some event that is relevant for our analytics. We don't care about all the events. We just emit events because it's good to emit events, but we don't need to process them all. So we have some kind of filter for the events that we care. And then we do some enrichment here, and this is depending on the version of the SDK, how we are processing the different versions to get the output that is coherent around all the different SDKs that are sending. At the end, we'll get all the same event. And then we are sending that to EventBridge, because that's how we are handling in our imaginary world all the events. But you can have here Kinesis or any of the data sources. So how this looks, let's try a demo. So here I have the Kinesis data generator. So this is a way just to, you don't see anything in this region, demo effect. I need to log in. I did log in before this, but it seems that the cookie expired. Yay. Let's see. There it is, my pipe. This is my Kinesis stream. So I will be sending some events. So here I prepare 3 events to it. First one is an event that doesn't pass the filter. So these are these random events that are being sent. Then I have events that are coming from this iOS latest and greatest SDK that are in the right format. And then I have events from an older Android SDK that instead of having the user ID, has the device ID. And this is something that happens for me in real life, that our older SDK has the device ID, and then we needed to do some magic in our backend to handle this. So this is really reminiscent of old times. And we can send these different events and see how these are affected. So the first step will be to filter. And when we filter, you can see here how the filtering in pipes looks. We can write a small JSON that will say just let pass the events of the type filter. And if you look at the events, they have type filter. So these ones will pass, and this one has a type that doesn't pass. And here we can put an array of different things that we will let pass, and there is a lot of rules to build this filtering. So it's not just, it can be prefix, it can be don't contain. The amount of complexity that we can build these rules is quite high. So after the events that are filtered pass, the next step is to enrich. And one interesting thing here is Kinesis send the event, the data is base64 encoded. And here in the filtering and in the enrichment, we can assume that the data is already decoded. We don't need to do the decodification ourselves. So if you were playing with this data in a Lambda function, for example, if you have this connected to a Lambda function, then you will need to do the decoding and of the data, but Pipes will do that for you. It understands that this is Kinesis. It needs to decode the data. So basically, you can work here as the data was already decoded for you. And then in the enrichment, yes?
No, go ahead, Maz. I felt like it's quite a great concept that customers don't need to do the heavy lifting here, like decode, writing that whole code. So decoupling that that logic, customer just focus on their business outcomes.
Exactly. And then in the enrichment, we just say what data we want to pass to the step functions of the event that is coming. I will pass the whole event. And then the step function will look something like this. That is a very simple state machine in which I have a state that says choice. And here I'm basically, okay, if it's Android, I here could have a very complex set of different parallel tracks depending on the SDK, but I'm making it simple for this demo. If it's Android, then we need to clean the output. And this, what we'll do, it will just call, here. It will just basically go to a Dynamo, get user info, sorry. It will just call the Dynamo get item with the device ID, and it will get back the user ID. But here we could have a Lambda function. We can have as much complexity as you need. But this is a simple get from Dynamo, and then the clean the output is just basically doing a little bit cleaning on the output of the event, so it looks like I want it. So let's try this. Let's send first some good events. So let's try with this iPhone event that this one should pass. And how we see this, we should start seeing executions in our state machine. That's the first thing we should start seeing, and they're already here. Let's stop this so we don't send 2 million events. So we can see here that there at least one execution per event, and then we can see how the execution work. Because they were iPhone and they were already pretty, they went to success directly, and we can see the output. So this was the event output that is exactly as the event input. And these events were going to event bridge, and the event bridge has a log group, basically just a simple log as a destination. So here is my log group that is getting all the events. Let's refresh it. These are the latest. And we can see here, this is the event that event bridge got. So that worked. Next one, let's do the don't pass. So now we should not see anything either in our log group or in an execution, because pipes should filter those events, should not trigger the state machine, should not put anything in the event bridge target. So let's send some data. And let's go back to the state machine and refresh it. And we should not see anything. So here, I don't know if you see my time, but it's 10:39, and nothing will come. We can refresh as much as you want, but nothing will come here. And the same in our log group. We can refresh here. Up, one back. And nothing will come here. So let's stop this.
What's there's a
yes,
question that's related to this. What's the observability on that then? So how do I know that that's being filtered? Because obviously there's nothing in there, right? So there's no
yeah.
indication. So if I want observability on that, in case someone's written a really big don't pass one, and they're filtering out something I really do want, how do I know that that has occurred?
I have to say that there is not much around observability yet in this feature. There is some monitoring here on the pipe, but you will need to wait a little bit for it gets to populated. But yeah, there is a lot of guessing.
Okay.
That's something that is in the works. What is the level of observability customers want? Because this involves a lot of data. So sometimes having just numbers for the sake of numbers is it's more confusing than not having the numbers. So that's something that we are working on to find what is the right level of monitoring, and what is the granularity that it makes sense to provide. So here we can see that there was some invocations and things like that, but you cannot see like the ones that were filtered out. You cannot see. You can see the ones that passed. These are the 11 ones that we saw before for the successful iPhone, but the filter out ones, they just I don't think they will appear. We will see in a moment, but that's something that is in the work. Then we have the Android, and this one is the one that should execute the step function and should get change, so get enrich, so we can send that data. And now we should see executions coming into the pipe. So let's wait for it. So here you can see 1041 and 1041. So let's stop this. So we don't have 2 million. And here you can see that now the whole state machine executed this and then went through here, and then it cleaned the output and it returned a thing with the user ID in place. That is the thing that our downstream services will want. We can even, in the clean of the output, we can even remove the device ID, but I'm not removing it. So in the logs, we can see now that is our target destination for this use case, but it could be an app or a service or an API or whatever you need here, that the event went through with the right format that I wanted. So this is in a nutshell how pipes work. And again, you can do anything here. You can put a Lambda function, you can put a state machine with as much complexity as you want. And this really helps you to do these integrations between different sources.
Marcia, quick question here. So for source and target, do they need to be into the same AWS account, or the cross AWS accounts are supported here?
For now, it's the same AWS account. So that's something I think it's should come eventually, because customers are working with that. But when you talk about event bridge, if that's your destination, we have this cross account support. So this is something that if you need, for example, to integrate Kinesis to Event Bridge, you can send it here, and then Event Bridge can connect to your Event Bridge in your other AWS account, and that's kind of work. But for now, these two things needs to be in the same account.
Got it. And how about, let's say, if I'm not dealing with the critical events, does it support batching and that sort of mechanism so that customers can bring the cost down?
Where you want to batch?
The batching of the events, so rather than just processing one
so
event.
let me show you the code. So let's see. So this is built with SAM, and the code I will share it to you at the end. But for example, for Kinesis, you can do this. Depends on the source if it allows you to do batching. For example, Dynamo allows you to do batching. Kinesis allows you to do batching, and this is very important because, for example, if you have a lot of events coming through Kinesis and you are passing it to event buses, the concurrency is a little different. So in this case, batching will help to make the events go faster through the pipe. So this is something that definitely you need to have in mind, that you can do it. Yeah.
Got it. That makes sense now. Thanks, Marcia.
No
So
problem.
thank you so much for such a cool demo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's looks we look at the power of serverless, that how organization can go to market really quickly with the serverless thing. Marcia, from your understanding, because you are working with customers as well, what are the trends you are seeing, like how organizations are benefiting through the serverless technology? Any customer you would like to share with us here?
Yeah, well, one of the things I've been doing lately is to write stories about customers. So, few, I think weeks, month, I don't know, time goes in a weird way. In April, I wrote this launch blog, this blog post, and I'm writing many of these, how customers are benefiting from these services, and in particularly these launches. So, for example, this is a customer called Cyber GRX. I'm dyslexic, so these acronyms is very hard. And they are using this. One of the launches I mentioned that I'm very excited about, that is the distributed map. The idea of distributed map is that you can run in parallel the same process. It's like a map in JavaScript that you can basically run the same function to all the different elements in the array. But the cool thing here is that you can run it for 10,000 parallel executions at the same time in the cloud. So that's very, very powerful. So these customers, Cyber GRX, for example, are a company that are predicting how different companies are responding to risk assessment questionnaires. So that's quite normal that companies might not respond to these risk assessment questionnaires, and then companies consuming services from them want to know what is the value of these risk assessment questionnaires. So the Cyber GRX are basically inferring that based on some predictions. That's the know-how of the company. They take some data of each of these third-party companies, and they get a result, and they sell that data. So currently they have over 200,000 companies in there, and they started using step functions a while ago. And well, I will give you the link at the end of what was the story. But basically, they started using step functions a while ago. And when this feature, the distributed map, was launched in December, one of the engineers went totally crazy about it. They saw this is the solution to all our problems, and spent the whole Christmas hacking it around and rebuild everything. So they went, when they started this process with step functions, from 90-minute execution and a code that needed a lot of kind of care, because they have to do a lot of pre-processing in order to do the parallelization and take advantage of the parallelization, to an architecture that basically runs by itself with no babysitting whatsoever. Nobody needs to look at it. It just works. And they decreased the time to less than an hour of this execution. So now they can run the model over all the companies, super simple, without needing to worry. And that has freed so many engineers of time of babysitting this algorithm. They just can allow their now data scientists to run this at doc. Before, it was a whole like, okay, if you want to run this, we need to like sit with you, and we need to make sure everything is working. Now with these step functions and distributed map, they basically, everybody can run this thing every day if they want. It just works. So that opens a lot of opportunities for them, because selling this risk assessment data is very important for them. It's part of their business. So now they can improve the model, they can tune it, they can have better predictions, they can have more companies coming into the application. Before, it was very scary for them, because when they started with this journey, they were not using even step functions, they were using something else, and it took like 9 days to run this thing. And they have 100,000 companies, and they were very afraid, because they, okay, if we keep on growing the amount of companies we are working with, then how we are going to scale this? Now they are not worried about that. They don't feel that it's a problem to have more and more companies doing this risk assessment because they know the scale, this works, and it just does a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting for them. So this is a really cool story on how they are using the distributed map and the benefits of the massive parallelization.
That's a great customer outcome, that how they are running the large scale parallel workloads, and they are managed to scale. So you mentioned that they started with 150,000 customers, and I
Yeah.
went through the blog post. Now they have 225,000 something. So
Well, this is the one that when I interview them, I'm pretty sure now they have more. So they run it over 227, 527 customers. That's the amount of companies they were working with. But by the pace they are growing because they are a startup, and now with this solution in place, I'm pretty sure now they are not afraid of getting more companies and growing their business. So
yeah, that's great. Like improving efficiency and running the workloads at scale. That's a great customer outcome there, Marcia.
yeah.
Marcy, we have a couple of questions here. Well, actually, the first one from Cloud Obsession is a statement. Wow, Marcia, your Foobar serverless channel rocks.
Thank
So
you.
clearly their judgment is impaired. Joking, I'm sure. They have a follow-up question, which means their judgment is not impaired because it's a really good question. Can you talk about some of the best practices for monitoring of serverless apps?
Yeah, that's a whole session in itself.
Hey, Trevor, I did the Twitch session on that last month,
Yeah,
with serverless applications.
Do
So
we have any
that
we
blogs we could point the team to, or?
it's on the Twitch, so we can point it onto the Twitch session.
Okay,
yeah,
excellent. Oh, so we did one previously, Twitch
that's
session on
good.
monitoring serverless apps. Excellent.
Yes.
We'll
Yeah.
find it and post the link.
Yeah. And serverless is such a broad concept nowadays that it really depends on what are the services that are in place. But I always say that serverless is like herding cats. So it's sometimes very hard to know, and more when you're doing event driven, very hard to know what you're looking at and what is going on. But yeah, so one, for example, if you're doing event driven, one way to have a little bit of understanding what is going on in your application, if you want to have a visibility on all the events that are going on, at least maybe in the beginning of your application or in your staging environment, is to have this something that a lot of customers do it, at least for understanding what is going on. Let me show it in the code. So for example, here I have an event bus. This is a custom event bus. And then I have a rule for that bus that basically matches all the events and will put all the events into a custom log group. So I can see everything that is coming through my event bus. And this helps me then to either I can also create a rule that store all these events for being replayed later. And I can, okay, if there was an error, I can replay this later in my staging environment, and I can try to pinpoint what is the problem, because sometimes it's very hard to find those errors in a big scale or in production or something like that. So for example, if you don't know serverless espresso, we built with my team, we do that. We grab all the events that happen whenever we are out in the field serving coffee and doing serverless, and then we replay those with a robot tester thing that we have that will replay all the events, and we can use that to test and make sure that everything goes without any challenge. And if we find something in our testing, we have more time to visualize. So that's something that helps out to understand better what is your what is going on in your application. But yes, monitoring is challenging. So have dashboards and then have CloudWatch analytics on the important things that you care. One thing I always say that sometimes analytics on a specific service level things is pointless because things scale. So having more analytics on the business aspect. So for example, if you are doing a video app, you want to have a metric on how many people are playing that, are in your system, how many people are watching videos, and then have some kind of smart alerting. You can do that with CloudWatch alarms that will tell you, okay, you have a drop in your expected amount of views. Maybe that can trigger some investigation from your side, because that will tell a little bit the full story on what is going on in your serverless application. So those are some tips.
Thanks, Marcia. And Marcia, I think we are near the time. A few tips from your side. We are seeing that lots of customers are either on the modernization path or they are thinking about modernization. Or what will be your tips to these customers to accelerate their modernization journey, to their developers, and how they can go into that path really quickly?
Yeah, well, when we talk about serverless, it's really about empowering developers. So when we want to modernize, so there is the whole migration thing is another session itself, but usually we have the first step is to go to the cloud. So we can do as big lift and shift as possible. And then when we are in the cloud, we want to modernize our application to take advantage of all the things that the cloud native provides. So when we are in that step from, or we are already in the cloud and now we want to modernize, education to the developers is fundamental. So we can empower developers to build infrastructure as code and have, for example, many of the successful organizations that we have in place are uh, doing like a cloud platform team that is in charge of setting boundaries and creating safe environments and things like that for developers then to build their infrastructure and start to build things around without being afraid that they will break everything, because that fear when you're learning is very real. So empowering developers, that's my first thing. Have a team that is in charge of building boundaries so they can developers can feel free inside those boundaries to do whatever. Many organizations are doing like a serverless first approach. If we cannot build it with serverless, then we go containers and then we go down that rabbit hole, but thinking about how we can use managed services as much as possible, and then have good designs. Like event-driven architecture is a good way that allows you to do evolutionary architecture and things like that. And when we talk about um, modernizing, sometimes it's just integrating a legacy system with a newer system, and well, the legacy system eventually will disappear and we just build a new one, and we don't care about migrating the old one. And then these event patterns come into place, and there's many event patterns that will help you out.
Yeah, it's good. I think Trevor, you will agree with that. Marcia brought the topic that empowering developers, that is really important for organizations, and for that, AWS is also, we are also taking some stands how we can empower your developers in your organizations, like in Auckland, New Zealand, Wellington, and different cities. We are having the meetups every month, like developers tools. And community meetups are there. So please register yourself onto those meetup site. And we have got few more resources like serverlessland.com and some GitHub repositories, the blog documents, which Marcia was recently showing some code snippets, which
Yeah.
you can utilize that to improve your productivity, learn something new from there. And more importantly, we are having the cloud days on 13th of June. I think Trevor will know more about that. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cloud days. Look, it's filling up fast. This is our first cloud days after the first live cloud days, in-person cloud days. It's our big one in Auckland, so we've got a big room here. I think we're expecting over 1,000 people to come. So if you haven't registered, do register early. So if you search for New Zealand Cloud Days in AWS, you'll find the registration links for it. Like I say, I'm expecting a pretty full room. We had Summit just recently in Sydney, and I was over there. We had to turn people away at the door, unfortunately, because it was just so popular. So do register early. We also have, and this is my weekly pitch. If you haven't joined the AWS New Zealand Technical Channel on LinkedIn, I recommend that you do that as well. That's where we keep up to date with these types of sessions. So we'll broadcast on that within that channel that we're going to run these sessions. If we're running cloud days, we put a link in there early on, so you get to register before everybody else. A good example of this is we've just fully booked out for our generative AI events that are also coming early June. Both Auckland and Wellington are now full up, and we announced that to this channel first. So if you're not already a member of the AWS New Zealand Technical Channel, do request to become a member and we'll get you approved and get you in there. Excellent. I think it's all we've got left to say. Thank you very much to our guests today, Deepika and Marcia. This has been fascinating. Clearly, a lot of interest in this subject. Maybe we have to do a follow up on it in a later session later in the year. But thank you very much for both of you.
Thank you
Yes,
so
thank you. There is a link. I don't know if I can paste it in the chat, but I paste it for you guys. If you can paste it in the chat, where they can find the links for the code and the blog post and everything I talked today. There is some articles there as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Let me throw it into the chat now, just so everybody's
thank
got
you.
it. That's your blog one, correct?
Yes, yes.
Fantastic. Yep, we've uploaded that now.
Thank you.
Excellent.
one more link on serverless land one if we have got some developers and DevOps engineers out in the audience.
Good. Cool. Let me throw that one in there as well. And there you go. Excellent. Thanks very much, everybody. And we'll see you next time. We'll be back next Thursday at our normal time rather than the special time that we've done today. So thanks very much.
Thanks everyone.